for those who are politically wise, a show about the lives of Christians in Ohio involved with politics. Introducing your host, Reverend Thomas Wise.
Greetings, my fellow patriots, saints, and sinners. The show is titled Politically Wise, and I am your host, Reverend Thomas Wise. At the end of the show, there will be a blessing. Don't miss it. But first, a word from our sponsor.
Next time you're thinking about beating the train, think again. It takes a typical freight train traveling 50 miles an hour, 1.5 miles to stop. That's nearly 18 football fields. Don't try to beat the train. Ohio's roads can be highways or dieways. The choice is yours. A message from Operation Lifesaver and this station.
The opinions and statements on this show belong to those who give them. The rest of the show belongs to Thomas Wise Words, all rights reserved. The show is titled Politically Wise, and I am your host, Reverend Thomas Wise. This is Reverend Thomas Wise. The show is called Politically Wise. I am here sitting with Representative Ron Amstutz in his office at the Ohio State House. Ron, tell my listeners about yourself.
Well, Pastor, I thank you very much for the opportunity to share this time with you and your listeners. My name is Ron Amstutz. I grew up on a dairy farm in Wayne County, which is 3 counties south of Lake Erie, starting with Cuyahoga, and then you go down to Medina, and then Wayne County. And I grew up between Kidron and Dalton in the country, as I said, on a dairy farm, and eventually migrated to Orrville, where I had a chance to work as a journalist for a daily newspaper, the Daily Record, for a number of years. Then I had the opportunity to serve that small city as its mayor for 5 years, and then from there I came to the legislature, and I've been serving as a legislator since 1981 here.
How many terms did you serve here, and then you went to the Senate?
That's correct. I served for 20 years in the Ohio House, and the last 8 of those years were while the new constitutional provision was tolling on term limits. So as I got close to that 20-year mark, the 8-year term limit was coming up. My state senator, Grace Drake from Solon, was also term limited, and I had an individual I'd known for years that was pretty close to the things in the Senate get into my face one day and say, "You should seriously thinking about running for the Senate." And so that led to a campaign that gave me the opportunity to serve folks all the way almost up to Lake Erie. At that time, the district went up through Highland Heights, which is pretty close to I-90, which is pretty close to Lake Erie. So that was a district where I lived at the southern end of it in Worcester, and I've been living in Worcester since I married my wife during the first year of my service in the House in 1981. So we've had a wonderful life in the great county of Wayne.
Okay, so your wife and your kids and...
Yes. My wife is an art teacher at the elementary level and has been for many years. That's her ministry. And we have 2 fine children that are grown and out of the house, although our daughter's visiting us right now. But the oldest is my daughter, Julianne, and she's in food service and has experience as an assistant manager that way, so she works very hard. And then my son is a couple years younger, Jefferson. He recently graduated from Grove City College, which is a very faith-based college and a wonderful place, and has got a good job and a good wife that he found at college, and they live on the edge of Baltimore right now, working for a software development company. Mm-hmm. And he's having a good experience with that.
And you regularly go to church?
Yes, we believe that we need to be encouraged and participate in a worship situation on a regular basis, and we do that. We live almost across the road from a big church in Worcester, the Worcester Grace Brethren Church.
Worcester Grace Brethren, okay. And how long have you been going to that church?
Pretty much since my wife and I were married in 1981. We chose that church. We had friends that were going there, and it's been a blessing to have the opportunity to participate in ministry and in worship with so many folks who are like-minded.
So tell my listeners, what do you do here?
Well, here, because we actually are sitting in the office that I have in Columbus.
One of them.
Well, I have a small one over next to the committee that I have a chance to lead as the chairman, the Finance and Appropriations Committee. But this is my main office where I work out of. And what I do here, I kind of think of it usually as three parts. My primary job, of course, is to represent the citizens of Wayne County. We have a single county district. So that's the way the population works out. Wayne County is the right size to be a single county district. So that's my primary responsibility, to work on the legislative decisions that we make here on state law. And also the second part of what I believe my job is, it's not the official part, is to help people solve problems that maybe isn't a legislative problem, but they might be tangled in the bureaucracy somewhere, trying to get service or get an answer. So I try to help open doors or get problems solved for constituents that ask for help that way. The third thing that I do that I believe my job involves is learning from and also providing instruction the other direction. So it's a bilateral learning situation where I learn from my constituents and others around the state as I attempt to do the work that's for the good of Ohio, and then they need to hear from me on things that are going on so they can be informed and give feedback. So it's a respectful relationship back and forth between the citizens who I serve and the citizens that I'm asked to lead.
And you've done that job. Those are three things we'd also, as a House representative and as a state senator.
Yes. And we probably ought to complete the thought, because we sort of left it dangling there. After 20 years in the House, I did run for the Senate and was elected and served there for the time period that's allowed in our state constitution for 8 years. And after that period, after some pretty significant advice and prayer, I decided, well, all right, I'm going to run for the Ohio House again. And that's what led to me coming back to this House in 2009. So this is 2013, and I have potentially a few more years to serve in that capacity before the 8 years are up.
And we will be right back after the break.
To some people, they're just a pet, a dog or a cat. But to you, they're part of your family. They've shared your lives, provided companionship, and given unconditional love. And just like when a human family member passes on, you want your four-legged family members to be treated with dignity. Baker, Hazel, and Snyder Funeral Home and Crematory has been caring for families since 1941 and now offers the same level of service for your pets at Snyder Pet Crematory. Call 274-1151, 274-1151.
The show is titled Politically Wise, and I am your host, Reverend Thomas Wise. Position do you have, other than being a representative here, you have a position in the government with it?
Yes, many of our House members have been given assignments to do various things. We have a Speaker of the House, and then we have a leadership team that was elected. We have leaders in both parties that work in leadership posts, and also we have a committee structure where most of our work is done. The largest committee in the House is the Finance and Appropriations Committee, and that's the committee that the Speaker, Bill Batchelder from Medina County, asked me to lead these past 3 years, and so that's the current assignment I have. We have 31 members. There's 33 members in the Senate, so we have a committee of the 99 in the House. It's almost a third of the House, and it's been a blessing to work with those individuals as we do the work that often has fiscal impacts, but many other policy decisions, tax decisions and things often come through that committee because you have to balance the budget, and that means your revenues have to line up with your spending. So we do a lot of policy work there, and we're busy, but it's been a good experience.
So every year you have a major, not quite every year, but you've had two major budgets you have to push through.
Yes, we go through a process there where the governor makes a recommendation, and then we work and vet that in public with hearings. And we have 5 subcommittees that have special themes of topics, and they go off and have a lot of hearings. And then we bring it all back together and move it, change it, send it to the Senate, and they do the same thing. And then we iron out our differences and work with the governor, and he vetoes a few things, and then we have a finished product.
So so you champion the budget. Sure,
Well,
a champion is maybe not a good word, but it's you trim it, you guard it, you work it for its final version, and so.
Well, some say that you watch sausage being made, and it's a little bit like making law. There's a lot of give and take in a check and balance system like we have, and it gets messy at times.
So you've seen quite a bit here over the years.
I have.
The turbulence of the last couple of years, and you've done a lot of late nights and here. So it sounds like you're making sausage. Well, there's a grind there involved.
Well, a lot of people in our great state work very hard every day, and I'm thankful that I have meaningful work to do, and I've been given assignments. And yes, it's hard work, but good things almost never come without hard work.
So let's get back to the question. The next question is, and answer this any way you want. How does your faith play a role? Talk a little bit about what your faith is,
Sure.
and how does it play a role here?
I've given a lot of thought to that question over the years. I've thought about how does the design of our social relationships that God put together and explains to us in Scripture relate to our work. And there's a lot of differences, even within the faith community, on how to understand that. But my understanding is that God is at the center of everything. There is nothing that is not under His authority. All of us who align ourselves with God's family and are adopted into it then are in ministry to Him. It doesn't matter what our job is. If we have a job that's in conflict with what God has designed, then we can't do that job. And there aren't very many of those, but there are some that would be inappropriate. But for most of us, for the vast majority of us, we are called to bloom for God's glory where we're planted. And that's my view. So I view my work as a ministry. I work for the people, but first I work for the Lord.
How did you develop? You said you thought a lot about this over the years. Can you give me an example where that was tested?
Well, early on, and by the way, my faith was on hold. Even though I grew up in a very believing family and church, my faith was on hold for a period of time as I was trying to figure out things as a young man, going into adulthood. And it wasn't until I was serving as mayor of Oroville that I actually reconnected and began an active faith life. So that was in 78. So in 80 I got elected to the House. So I was still fairly new in my faith in terms of it as an adult. And so the example I'm going to give you is one of the first bills fairly early on in 81, 82. We had the death penalty reenacted as a proposed bill. It was not enforced because the Supreme Court had said that the methods and so on and the law didn't comport with constitutional provisions. So I had to make a decision. So I went through a very analytical process of, what are the bases for reenacting the death penalty or not reenacting it. And I interacted with some of my members. I talked to some pastors. One of them was to be my future pastor. I didn't know that at the time. But so that I ended up being a review of biblical law, really, for me, and the question of, well, how does that apply? And I was able to make a decision that had I was taking the temperature of the citizens I represent and getting a sense for them, and it was a strong view on one side, and I had to ask myself, because that's a moral question, the question of the death penalty is very, very tough. So that's an example where my faith really came into question. A lot of times on bills, it's, should this be yellow or green, and how much, $50 versus $150. So those are different kinds. Those aren't necessarily moral decisions, although they can be, depending on what the situation is, part of a larger question. So that's an example of where my faith really got challenged and was able to grow. And similarly, in the life area, the question of how we value human life over against other kinds of created life has been a journey for me towards, I think, a more, maybe mature understanding of how we in the legislature have responsibilities to represent the design for how our relationships are to be conducted in as a society. That underlying moral question does come to play from time to time, and it's very important to take that seriously.
And every Christian needs to talk to God about those kind of decisions. So I'm encouraged to hear that even in your position here, that your policy leads to things, and so leads to outcomes, and so seeking the Lord's wisdom, seeking the Lord's guidance, seeking the Lord's law about how to establish a law that would be good for man and good for the state and good for God. And so is there some other things that you've been here long enough? I know you were involved with the state motto for a while.
Yes, in God we trust. That was when Governor Voinovich was our governor, and he was very strong on wanting to promote the state motto. And of course, there were those at the time who were against that idea, and so there was a lawsuit. And when that lawsuit was settled, there had been a prearrangement with them. They came to me and said, would you carry the legislation to put the state motto at the foot of the major front door staircase that from the outside street level up to the State House? And so as soon as that decision came down, they installed that like overnight and got it in place, and that was a very special chance to help the governor execute that or put into place the whole idea of making it clear that our trust is in the Lord.
And so even now,
I'm saying it wrong though, because it's actually with God all things are possible. Let's
right.
Let's do a little amendment here and get this correct.
The show is titled Politically Wise, and I am your host, Reverend Thomas Wise. Do you pray for a politician? Do you think a politician can be a Christian? Do you think a politician should stand up for Christian principles? Do you think politicians should pray together? Do you want to see more Christians in politics? If you said yes to any of these questions, please join the Ohio Prayer Caucus Network. Find the Ohio Prayer Caucus Network on Facebook. Welcome back to Politically Wise. If you want to email me, you may do so at politically.wise@gmail.com. Please like us on our Facebook page, Politically Wise. Anything else that you want to share about your faith?
Well, I will say this. So much of what we're called to do, it's the little things that matter more than we talked about big things like the death penalty and how we handle life issues and so on, but it's often the little things. People want to know whether we care, and that's a command. It's a second command. The first command is that we love God, and that means be committed totally to Him. It's very hard to do because we have a tendency to be self-centered, but the second command is to show God's love to others, and that's often misunderstood because the way God defines love is way different than the way men and women do on their own. So we have to learn from Him what it means to be committed to the well-being of others in ways that isn't unhealthy. It has to be healthy. So that's kind of a philosophical response, but a lot of our work ends up being very personal relationship work, and I've learned to respect many members that don't think like I do, but who are committed to trying to do what's right. Then we run into people we can't trust. We get all kinds.
A lot of passion for the state, a lot of care for the state. They love the state of Ohio just as much as you do, and they have their own vision and worked it out. Their relationship with God, they're calling how to apply those two commandments.
Correct. We need to be respectful as legislators and not think that we're the experts, because usually we're not. There's almost always some folks out there on whatever issue we're working on that know a lot more about it than we do. So we have to be respectful, and that's true in faith as well.
So what if someone wants to follow in your footsteps? What would you recommend that they do?
Well, I actually would suggest that they not think first about running for office, but first about getting involved in serving in a maybe group setting, whether it's a campaign or it could be on an issue where there's going to be interaction with other legislators, and develop an understanding of how those interactions work. It's often, I think, missed that the most influential things that happen often aren't by the elected officials, but rather those that advise them and work with them, whether it's in the campaign setting, which is a preparation to serve. A good campaign for office is filled with people who want to help prepare that candidate to be an effective elected official. So I would recommend that if they wanted to move in this direction, at least in the earlier stages, that they spend some significant time, probably years, being involved in helping others who are seeking office or are in office to work through issues. That would be my suggestion.
So have them get involved in a campaign, find an issue that they really care about, and go work like dogs in that, so to speak.
Work hard.
Work hard. Work smart.
Fly right.
Yeah. Let's start with a visit to the State House to see what you all do down here.
Well, and let me just give you an example. I was contacted by a college student from my district here last year, interested in political science, a political science major, and actually a double major with history. And she said, I'm interested. So I said, well, let's have a cup of coffee. And we did, and we talked over some things. And I said, you might want to come to Columbus someday and just kind of be around and shadow for a day. And so she did that. And during those conversations, I said, there's a program that we have for college graduates. Once they come out of college, they can apply for a one-year fellowship to work inside the legislature as a staff member for a whole year, getting paid. It's a paid position. And we have like 22 of those positions, maybe it's 24, somewhere in there. And so she made that application, and I think over 200 people typically apply for this. She was selected. So this was an opportunity for a young person who's very interested in trying to make a difference and is bright to actually get involved in a way that she'll learn things that most people will never know, because she will be directly involved in the legislative process here for a year.
Yeah, and usually that position leads to other things.
Yes, those that work regularly with us in the legislature, inside the legislature, and as there's countless groups that get involved in the legislative process because of concerns and policy matters, and many of those serve as LSC Legislative Service Commission fellows. That's our professional group that provides us bill drafting and everything, the Legislative Service Commission. And those fellowships, then those people go on to do many things.
How do you handle all the voices up here, all the distractions, all the voices, the people coming after you? or so to speak, coming to you.
Right.
The ways upon ways upon ways.
Well, there is a lot of that, and that's our job. So we need to embrace it, but we also need to be careful because there are those who don't have the best interests of the state. Often they have their own interests at heart, and you have to understand that if they're effective, they will recognize that they need to be respectful of other sides to an issue, and that's usually how they're more effective, is to say, look, here's why we believe this is the right way to go on a policy, and here's background, but here's the other side to that, and so they aren't just totally selfish and one-sided.
How do you keep your head clear, your heart clear, your mind clear with all of that goes up here?
Well, that's a good question, and I'm not going to get on some kind of soapbox and make myself something that always has a clear head and so on. But quite frankly, that's something you have to develop in your relationship. It's a maturity factor, and the pressures that happen. I often use one of my favorite sets of verses is in James chapter 1. Consider it pure joy when you face all kinds of trials, and that would be the pressures and things that tend to work against having a clear head. Consider that pure joy. Those trials are there to cause us to persevere and to grow more mature and more dependent, frankly, on the Lord's leadership and guidance in our own lives. And when I get too frenetic and busy and trying to do too much, I just have to take some quiet time and back up and say, oh, okay, this isn't about me, and I need to quiet down, steady up, and that's very helpful. But it's really the Lord's grace that helps any of us to deal with the pressures of life, and everybody has those. Everybody, not just legislators.
So what's the future hold for you?
Well, that's in God's hands. If we live by faith, we don't really know what the future holds, but we do know in some ways because He reveals, down the road, we know where things are going. We just aren't sure maybe what the next chapter is going to be. But I have an opportunity to, continue to work with my colleagues, and that's my goal is to try to be helpful there. That was one of the reasons I decided to try to come back to the House, was to work with. We have many wonderful members here who, on both sides of the aisle, who are here for the right reasons. They really want to do good things. They don't always agree, and I can learn from them. And every day I learn from them. It's amazing how much expertise they bring from life experience and professional experience, and some of them even have a lot of governmental experience. So, but I think I can probably add value in working with them, and that's my goal, to be a servant to them at the same time that I'm trying to serve our great state.
So you have this term, and you have one more term after this, two-year term.
Correct. Yeah, basically 3 more years. If the voters will have me in the next election cycle next year.
But by God's grace, right?
Always.
Always by God's grace. Well, thank you for your time today. This is Reverend Thomas Wise. I've interviewed Ron Amstutz in his office at the State House. The show is called Politically Wise, and I am your host, Reverend Thomas Wise. And we will be right back after the break. The show is titled Politically Wise, and I am your host, Reverend Thomas Wise. Thank you for listening today. If you want to email me, you may do so at politically.wise@gmail.com. Please like us on our Facebook page, Politically Wise. Now, here's your blessing. Blessings based on Psalms 4, verses 1 through 8. May God answer you when you call. May God grant you relief from disaster. May you trust in the Lord. May you be blessed when God's face shines on you. May you know God's blessing when you lie down and sleep in peace.